outreach strategies.
Great, thank you, Iris, and thank you everyone who participated yesterday in the task force meeting. You all gave such valuable input, and I think we came up with some really interesting things. So I'm excited to share some preliminary results with the broader group. We had the flow to the workshop with 4 sections: external audiences, internal needs, internal resources, and information exchange. So when we're talking about external, it's external to the row working group, and internal is within the row working group. So the group identified, the task force identified 16 audiences that they're talking to that are indispensable to the success of their work. But we had an easy time ranking the top 4 as the most important audiences for row as a whole. And those top 4 are regulators, consumers or individuals, internal company leadership, and landowners. So just pocket that for a minute. We're going to come back to it. I'll read it again. Regulators, consumers or individuals, internal company leadership, and landowners. Next, we talked about what would make the ideal habitat conservation plan or program. And it's funny because it's exactly what would make any good program. It's well-funded, it makes business sense and has economic drivers, there are realistic goals and timelines, there's internal support and commitment, there are partnerships, there's an outreach plan, an evaluation plan, and a long-term maintenance plan. Sounds pretty good. Once we had this idea painted of what an ideal program would look like, we thought about, in actuality, what do we need to get there? What are we lacking that makes our programs not that sometimes? And these were things that came up. Funding, regulatory predictability, communicating the benefits of row habitat work, and that could be biological benefits, revenue benefits, success stories, more land protection, more legislative influence, landowner, manager buy-in, and leadership buy-in. For leadership buy-in, you could also say we need a compelling argument to business leaders or investors about the cost benefit of maintenance for habitat. Okay, so these were things that generally the working group members said they need. Then we asked, well, what can you contribute? Maybe you can contribute something else that somebody needs, or something that somebody else needs. And I should just mention that generally the people in the room were government, including transportation, company employees, general public, and conservation professionals. We found 12 things that you all could contribute to each other. And when we overlay it with what working group members need, there is some good overlap. People need and can contribute promotion and outreach support, funding and funding opportunities, land, legislative influence, and regulatory predictability. There are lots of other things people can contribute, like expertise and technical expertise and regulation requirement expertise, leadership by example, third-party validation, volunteers. But when it really comes to matching what we have with what others need, promotion, funding, land, legislative influence, and regulatory predictability rose to the top. What people said that they need that, and no one said they could contribute, landowner buy-in and leadership buy-in, kind of remain out there as this big nut to crack, right? That's identified as something we should really think about as next steps. How do we tackle that? Because it's not an easy thing to answer, but it seems very important. And we seconded the idea that seemed important when we ranked those top 4 audiences. 2 of the top 4 audiences are company leadership and landowners. So we identified this big need that can focus the communications and outreach task force moving forward. Meanwhile, we have this really easy thing to solve, not so easy, but we have resources that can address immediate needs for communicating with regulators and consumers or individuals. So, what's next? An information exchange where working group members can share these things. We have the discussion board, And I think that that's a really great tool for especially technical expertise. But when we're talking about some of these things like regulatory predictability or legislative influence, it might take a little bit more than just online discussion. So how can we really have an information hub to keep activity moving in between meetings where people can advance on these issues? Before we get to that, we want to make sure that even if you weren't there yesterday, you have the chance to contribute. So some volunteers from the task force are going to send a survey to everybody. It'll be quick, and you'll have time to do it, but we'll make sure that everyone in the working group gets to weigh in on what they need and what they can contribute, so that we're not just going off the people who are in the room, but we can really come up with a collective idea. And then I just wanted to end on some taglines we came up with to describe the value of Row, to keep that really top of mind, so we're really focused. Responsible landscape leadership, right way forward, vision for future, partnership, stewardship, biodiversity. Cool. Does anyone have any questions? Great, thank you.